Okay, so here's a question some people have. Is the God of the Old Testament evil? You know, you read stories about sometimes God allowing nations to be just destroyed and even sometimes commanding it. You read stuff like this in Leviticus 10. Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu put coals of fire in their incense burners and sprinkled incense over them. In this way, they disobeyed the Lord by burning before him the wrong kind of fire, different than he had commanded. So fire blazed forth from the Lord's presence and burned them up, and there they died before the Lord. Now, it seems like a pretty innocent mistake. It seems like something, these were priests of the Lord, and we don't know all the details of the story, but we definitely read this, and again, at first glance, you might read this and say, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like the God of love. It seems like maybe the Old Testament God is different than the New Testament God, or the Old Testament God is evil. Maybe you've wrestled with that and grappled with that. See, the stories of the Old Testament can often sound harsh and hard to understand, and it does show us the nature of God. But here's what we learn. It's different than what you think. God is holy, not evil. He's the opposite of evil. People are the evil ones. This is kind of the point, is the point in these stories is to show that the distance, the gap between a holy God and us, the people who aren't holy, who have sinned against God and who've messed up. And here's the other thing. God is just, and so real evil can't go unpunished. That's why verse 3 says this. And then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord meant when he said, I will display my holiness through those who come near me. I will display my glory before all the people." And Aaron was silent. See, we see here the picture of this huge gap between God and man. And we'll never understand these verses if we fail to see the depth of our sin problem. Again, Romans 6:23 says, "For the wages of sin is death." This illustrates, Leviticus 10 and so many other passages in the Old Testament illustrate that death has come into the world because of sin. Now, maybe you think your own sin isn't that big of a deal. But if you think that way, you're missing an important truth of the Bible. Our sin against God is a big deal. My sin, your sin, everyone's sin. It's a big deal, and it deserves death. See, when we read about the wrath of God in the Old Testament, our question shouldn't be, how could God be so full of wrath and judgment? Instead, we should ask, why doesn't God just zap us all? And this is the beautiful thing. We get the answer to that question in the Bible. Galatians 3 says this, "But Christ has rescued us from the curse pronounced by the law. When he was hung on the cross, he took upon himself the curse for our wrongdoing." See, the reason the Leviticus 10 stuff doesn't happen to you and to me if we've put our faith in Jesus isn't because God just said it's no big deal, your sin is no big deal. It's because Jesus went to the cross and absorbed the wrath of God there for you and for me in our place, for those who've put their faith in Jesus Christ. See, God is just, so someone had to pay for our sins. But God is love, so he sent his Son to do it. At the cross of Christ, we see both the justice and the love of a holy God.